Welcome back to Chess Tactic today, everyone. We've got a fantastic FIDE World Cup clash for you between two grandmasters, Aleksey Grebnev and Daniel Quizon. What starts as a calm Sicilian quickly erupts into chaos. With bold pawn pushes, piece sacrifices, and non-stop tension on both wings, this battle turns into a tactical masterpiece straight out of a chess thriller. Grebnev, with the white pieces, opens with pawn to f4, a classic, ambitious move, immediately taking a stake in the center of the board. And Quizon responds with the Sicilian defense, pawn to c5, we're in for a battle right away. Black is signaling that he's not here for a quiet draw, he's ready to fight. White develops the knight to f3, the most common and logical move, preparing to control the center and develop his kingside. And black plays pawn to g6, preparing to fianchetto the bishop. This is a slightly more modern take on the Sicilian, aiming for long-range pressure rather than immediate confrontation. Pawn to c3 from Grebnev. This is the Alapin variation. Instead of the sharpest main lines, white is aiming for solid central control with an upcoming pawn to d4. Black calmly develops the bishop to g7. This long-range piece will be a key player, slicing across the board and putting pressure on white's center. There it is, pawn to d4, just as planned. Grebnev establishes a powerful pawn center, challenging black to a strategic battle. Quizon immediately challenges that center, pawn takes pawn on d4, clarifying the central tension. White recaptures with the c-pawn, maintaining that strong central pawn duo and keeping the position flexible. In response, black plays pawn to d6, solidifying his own structure and preparing to develop his knights. An interesting prophylactic move, pawn to h3. This is a subtle but useful move to prevent black's knight or bishop from coming to g4 and annoying white's f3 knight. Black develops the knight to f6, a very natural move that puts pressure on the f4 pawn and prepares for castling. White develops his own knight to c3, defending the f4 pawn and controlling the center. Textbook development from both sides so far. And black castles kingside, tucking the king away to safety. The opening phase is concluding very smoothly for both players. White develops the light-squared bishop to etwo, preparing to castle and connect the rooks. A very solid and reliable setup. Black's knight comes out to c6. Look at the board, it's a picture of symmetry and calm, but don't be fooled, the tension is slowly building beneath the surface. Bishop to e3 from white, completing the development of the minor pieces and solidifying control of the d4 square. Black plays pawn to e6, another solid move. This creates a small but sturdy pawn center, preparing to challenge white later. White castles kingside, getting the king safe and bringing the rook into the game. All the pieces are now developed and ready for the middle game. And black mirrors white with pawn to h6. Just like his opponent, he's preventing any pesky pieces from landing on g5. Both players are being incredibly careful. White places the rook on cone, a very logical move, eyeing the semi-open c-file which could become a major battleground later. A subtle but useful move from black, tucking the king away on h7. This gets it off the g-file and prepares for any potential backrank skirmishes. Queen to a fur from Grebnev. This is the first real sign of aggression. The queen steps aside from the center and puts some subtle pressure on black's queen side. Black immediately responds with pawn to a6, a necessary move to stop any ideas of white's knight jumping into the b5 square. Rook to done, white centralizes the final major piece. Now, all of white's forces are harmoniously placed and ready for action. Black responds with knight to e7, a clever regrouping maneuver. The knight is heading towards a more active role in the center or on the queen side. The queen slides back to a3, keeping an eye on black's position and maintaining the tension. It's like a predator circling its prey. And black completes the regrouping with knight to e8. The plan is to bring this knight to c7 to defend the queenside and bolster the position. And here it is, pawn to f5. Grebnev breaks the symmetry and launches a bid for space. This move clamps down on black's position, restricting the f6 knight and taking full control of the center. The game just shifted from a quiet positional battle to a tense, strategic fight. Black's knight immediately jumps to f5, attacking the bishop on e3 and challenging white's new central control, a very active response. White saves the bishop by moving it to f4, where it continues to put pressure on black's kingside. Now, would you play pawn to d5 here? Black does, and it's a huge decision. This locks the center completely. From this moment on, the game is going to be won or lost on the wings, a very committal move that defines the rest of the game. Bishop to d3 from white, rerouting the bishop to a more active diagonal where it eyes the kingside, a smart repositioning. Black retreats the knight to e7. The skirmish in the center is over for now, and both sides are jockeying for position on the flanks. Queen to b3. Grebnev is now turning his full attention to the queen side, preparing to bring a knight to a fur to attack black's weak pawns. Black develops his knight to c6, hoping to counter white's queenside ambitions. And there it is, knight to a fur. This knight is heading for the weak squares on b6 and c5, a classic plan to exploit a space advantage. Black responds with knight to a fiv, a very direct counter, trying to trade off this troublesome knight or kick it away. Queen to b4. White keeps the pressure on, refusing to back down and forcing black to make another difficult decision. And black plays pawn to b5, kicking the knight and creating more queenside tension. This is getting incredibly sharp and complex. White's knight finds a dream square on c5. This knight is an absolute monster, controlling key squares and acting like a bone in black's throat. Black's knight lands on c4 in response. It's also a very strong piece, but white's knight on c5 feels just a bit more dominant. Queen back to c3. White is just calmly improving his position, knowing that the c5 knight gives him a huge long-term advantage. Black pushes through a pawn, trying to create counterplay on the queen side and undermine white's structure. White plays pawn to b3, finally challenging black's powerful knight on c4. It's time to resolve the tension. But black plays pawn to b4, a very clever intermediate move, forcing the white queen to move before capturing the knight. Excellent tactical awareness. Queen to c2, now white is ready to take on c4. The queen is also repositioned to help defend and potentially support a new attack. Black's knight swings over to a3. It's a strange-looking square, but it keeps an eye on key squares and prevents white's rooks from swinging over easily. Queen to e2, notice how white's queen has maneuvered all over the board. It's now perfectly placed to support a potential kingside attack. And that's a little hint of what's to come, watch closely. Black develops the bishop to d7, finally untangling his queenside pieces and connecting his rooks. Pawn to h4 and the storm clouds are gathering. After all that maneuvering on the queenside, white opens up a second front. This is a classic strategy. Use your space advantage to attack on both sides of the board. The real fireworks are about to begin. Black brings the knight to c7, desperately trying to consolidate and prepare for the incoming onslaught. Knight takes knight on d7, a brilliant positional exchange. White removes a key defender of the kingside and clears the way for his h-pawn to advance. A very subtle but powerful move. Black recaptures with the queen, but his position is becoming increasingly difficult to defend. And here comes the pawn, h5. The pressure on the kingside is becoming unbearable. The attack is gaining momentum with every move. Black's king is forced to step back to j8, a sad necessity as the threats mount on the h-file. Queen to e3, a brilliant multi-purpose move. It prepares to swing over to the kingside, eyes the weak g5 square and sets a deep hidden trap. This is the calm before the storm. And black falls for it, pawn to g5. It looks so natural, doesn't it? It attacks the bishop and blocks the h-file, but this move is a fatal, tragic mistake. Grebnev has seen something incredible. Knight takes g5, a thunderbolt on the board. Grebnev sacrifices his knight, tearing open the defenses around the black king. What a stunning, brilliant move. This is the kind of tactic that wins games and makes chess beautiful. The attack is now completely decisive. Black has no choice but to accept the sacrifice, pawn takes knight, but this opens the floodgates. And now bishop takes g5. The lines to the king are completely open. White's attack is crashing through with unstoppable force. Black tries to create an escape route with rook to c8, a desperate attempt to survive, but it's far too little, too late. Pawn to h6, this pawn is a dagger pointed at the heart of black's position. The bishop is forced to retreat to height, where it becomes a sad spectator to its king's demise. Bishop to height is the only move, but now the king's fortress is in ruins. Pawn to h7 check, the king is flushed out into the open, forced to fate. There is nowhere left to hide. The king steps to fate, but the mating net is closing in. And the final, crushing blow, bishop to f6. This is just beautiful. It attacks the knight on e7 and black is completely paralyzed. If the knight moves, queen to h6 is mate. There is no defense, and at this point, black resigns the game. A spectacular finish to a brilliant attack. What an absolutely brilliant attacking performance by Grebnev, a masterclass in building pressure and unleashing a decisive sacrifice at the perfect moment. A fantastic game for us to learn from. Thanks for watching Chess Tactic today, and we'll see you next time.